Thank you, Thomas. Welcome, everybody. I will take you on a journey today, a journey into the interplay between artificial intelligence and liturgical creation. And as you can see from the first slide, I'll start with a book. But then I will just go further. So taking the context from printed books, adding AI to it, look at what lessons could we learn from an AI worship service in Germany 2 years ago. Then I will look what does it mean for large language models if we apply them to liturgical creation. And at last, I will try to look at possible approaches to integrate AI into liturgical creation. So as you can see, this is the past. I remember as a young pastor in the 90s, I received this draft of a revised agenda. That's what we call it, like the book of worship. And we were encouraged to try it out in our congregations and report it back. So it was a book. What happens in the future? I don't know. I believe AI will play an important role in creating liturgies, but the output has to be reliable and not a garbled text like this. As you can see, I wanted to create the first slide, used my book, and this is what ChatGPT transformed it into. So it's just like garbled text. So this is something we do not want. Um, when I started and submitted the abstract for this presentation, I had a general idea of the topic, and my immediate experience was a workshop I attended last fall during the conference of the Liturgical Commission of the Evangelical Church in Germany. The workshop There was a workshop on simple liturgical language, and participants were given instructions to rewrite prayers in this style, which is a religious adaptation of simple German. During that workshop, I converted the instructions into prompts, scanned the text. We had to transform OCR the text with my cell phone and used ChatGPT to generate the rewritten text in liturgical simple language. Comparing my results with those of other participants, I found that ChatGPT was not only very good, but a lot faster. So I found that LLM, large language models, can be very helpful in making liturgical texts, making them more accessible. They can translate high church complex liturgical language into simple German. This makes liturgies easier to understand for individuals with diminished capacities. And after using ChatGPT with various prompts, I created a custom ChatGPT tool dedicated to transform liturgical text into simple German. It was relatively easy to do, as you can see in the screenshot. So what happens if we use AI to create liturgical texts? We started with printed books, as you can see, and traditionally, a liturgical commission edits the liturgy, and then this commission prepares the liturgy. It is approved by the synod. Then from the synod, a trial version is sent to congregations and pastors for evaluation. Feedback is collected from parishes and congregations, and based on that feedback, the final text was developed by the commission and adopted by the synods. And finally, the liturgy is published as a book or as a PDF. And here you can see the trial agenda, which I received when I became a minister in the 90s. In theory, pastors could use these published agendas, but they either use the printed book and add personal notes to adapt it to a specific occasion, or they scan the book and transfer the text into Word Processor to edit it and adjust it. But here's the question: why not use modern tools like GPTs? Imagine simply entering the occasion and names into GPT and getting almost ready-made liturgical text that can be further revised as needed. So this is the context. But let's consider an essential question. Who is the creator of liturgy? In the early church, and from a theological standpoint, God can be seen as the creator of liturgy. As Maximus the Confessor explicitly describes this divine origin in his work Liturgy. He writes, "The Holy Church of God, a figure and image of God, is united with him by the sacred liturgy and by the deifying communion of the divine mysteries." So this statement highlights the understanding of liturgy as something not merely human, but divinely inspired. And the church fathers generally emphasize that God is the true author of liturgy. Just like going like 1,000 years and switching 1,000 years, like in the area of the Enlightenment, however, we see a shift in the perspective. Theologians like Friedrich Daniel Schleiermacher argue that liturgy and worship express the faith of the community. For Schleiermacher, religion is deeply communal. The consciousness of absolute dependence on God comes alive in the fellowship of believers. Liturgy, therefore, is a collaborative act shaped by the shared expression and faith of particular Christian communities. And Schleiermacher writes that those who have the gift of spontaneous expression, such as pastors, develop liturgy from their self-awareness. They express what the community believes. And in his view, self-communication and shared experience become the channels through which the Holy Spirit works in a gathered community. So here you can see, at least in English, the original quote of Schleiermacher. In 2 years ago, there was an AI-generated worship service in Germany conducted by Jonas Zimmerlein. You can see the reference underneath the picture. And the entire service was produced by AI. The sermon, the blessings, the prayers, the music. So it was totally AI generated. And the service was conducted by avatars on the screen. And before and after the service, participants attended for sessions for explanation and discussion. And it was conducted as an experiment. However, what can be gained from a quantitative analysis is that AI was quite good, but it showed some clear trends. So items related to emotional stimulation experiences are rated as interesting, exciting, valuable, and motivating, scored high overall. However, if you see how people reacted towards it, there was a strikingly high standard deviation, indicating that the opinions were deeply polarized. And this was especially true when it came to the perceived usefulness. Some found the service was helpful and rewarding, while others did not. And I looked at the feedback from the congregation after the AI-led service, and it highlighted several sentiments. So with regard to human pastors, love reached me, as well as the AI was too fast, too impersonal, no emotional level. And some felt that there was no replacement for the warmth and connections of a service led by real people. This does not replace people who lead and shape a service, and they express the appreciation for the familiar touch of human-led liturgies. And a significant critique was the speed and impersonal nature of the AI service, with some suggesting it lacked the emotional depth of human beings. AI still lacks the human touch, but human services are not always better. This is how one observer summarized it. And some observers also found that the AI's output was colorless and it lacked the eye of the preacher. So AI also holds up a mirror to us. It's not so bad, and perhaps there are already more AI-generated liturgies and sermons out there than we actually know or we might like to admit. So this was like some data and responses from a service completely produced by AI. I also just looked at a case where I prompted ChatGPT, and I'm using ChatGPT as an example for commercial large language models for Lutheran liturgy for Holy Communion. So I asked ChatGPT to give me a Lutheran liturgy, a traditional Lutheran liturgy of the Holy Communion. And as I did in English, I was given the Lutheran hymnal from 1941 from the Missouri Synod, the conservative branch of Lutheranism in the US. When I asked, use a more contemporary Lutheran liturgy, which are available, the Missouri Synod popped up first, and the ELCA, the bigger body of Lutheranism in the US and the more mainline body, popped up second. And then I asked for a full liturgy for Trinity Sunday with corresponding texts. Um, I got a question if I would like incense. So this is like totally something which is not really Lutherans. And also the texts were incorrect, as you can see in these slides. So the conservative denomination comes first. Then I was given wrong readings, and only after I insisted on the correct readings for Trinity Sunday, I was given these readings, which are then, as I checked, correct. And also, if you look at it, I asked for the sources that were used. And you can see right in the upper right corner, it's a Facebook reference that comes first. And also there are references from the United Methodist Church and the Disciples of Christ, denominations that are non-Lutheran. So what does that mean if we dive deeper into what are LLMs? And they are basically a black box. I just want to recall a statement of Pope Francis, which was quoted by Purcell, who I'm going to quote later myself. And Pope Francis says that technology is born for a purpose, and its impact on human society always represents a form of order in social relations and an arrangement of power. It is more or less explicit way this constitutes power dimension of technology always includes the worldview of those who invented and developed it. There's a new study. I think it's just a preprint I'm quoting, but it showed who are the people who develop AI and who are the people who use AI. This study, it's like a next study which draws on developers and users from France, so might be a little bit different in other contexts, but the study shows that developer teams are mostly male dominated, and they have a more utilitarian and less diversity endorsing worldview. And this misaligns with the diversity of AI users. And also another study by Brinkman shows that LLMs inherit biases from their training data. So mostly there is a bias for gender, racial and socioeconomic biases. And also there's the challenge that there are underrepresented languages and communities. So there is a risk of cultural erosion. Apply that to religion. However, the study also shows that if data are curated, this might enhance cultural diversity. So it's basically, we do not know how AI works. It's a black box, but we know is that the values of the developers is like a certain point of worldview, and also there is a certain cultural um, inhomogeneity with the users. And also, there is the danger, which was recently pointed out, of LLM grooming. As you can see, as we know that Russia and China, they put up fake websites that are scraped by large language models. So in information, data is entered as training data, which do not really have a relation to the real world, but they are propaganda. So what happens if this is done by some player regarding religion? We have to be careful. We don't know yet, but it's naive to think this wouldn't happen. Let me share with you what does it mean, how liturgical creation worked before AI. As a young pastor, I was taught, and that's what I did. There's prayer and meditation before preparing a service, and because there is a spiritual dimension to it. Because, as dogmatics teaches, the Holy Spirit speaks in the service, and prayers are the articulation of the community's spirituality by the pastor brought before God. At that time, I read the homiletics by Rudolf Bohren. So he said, above all, I need the Holy Spirit to preach. And he introduced the concept of theonomous reciprocity, which means that preaching is an interaction of divine and human combination. And they are, preacher and the Spirit are reciprocal partners. But what happens if we add AI to it? The pastor becomes the prompter, replacing prayerful listening with command-based input. and human-divine interaction becomes human-machine interaction. And in non-customized, that is commercial large language models, results are shaped by biased training data and fine-tuning by engineers whose values may not align with the Christian community. So, and that's what, there's also probably a lack of inspiration, as was shown by the survey done after the AI service in Germany. So what can we do? I think AI can be very helpful for transforming texts, like simplifying language, as I've shown with my GPT, and adapting text for specific contexts, like translation, for example, for minority churches. So it's easy to have like bilingual services. But what is really important is to train pastors in media literacy and to recognize and challenge biases. And for example, I was giving a talk on to pastors in a nearby city, and I prompted ChatGPT to give me like the first slide, and it was like two male pastors at the front and three women in the back. So it was really clearly gender biased, although when I prompted it, I made sure it was gender neutral language I used. So there is bias, and we have to be careful not to basically multiply the biases of a large language model. So we must need media training for pastors if we use large language models and AI for liturgical texts. And we always must ensure that there's a human in the loop. However, and I think that is really important, is that we use the possibilities that GPTs offer. And in Germany, it's really hard to get good liturgical texts because relevant texts are not freely available. So it's important that we have developed our own GPTs with our own relevant texts, and also to fine-tune them that they align with our own standards, and also engage the community in reinforcement learning. So involve the community members in this iterative process of improving the GPT that we have. But there is also like one more question or one more topic I think that is important. If you look at it, that's why there was this conservative bias, probably in the example from Lutheran tradition in the US. The conservative denominations, their texts are more spread on the internet. So that is why there is a conservative bias. So I feel that each denomination is responsible to also make their texts available, that they can be included metadata, that they can be scraped, that also provide them with metadata. So if we make them available and do not hide them behind like paywalls, then they can also become training data. And if somebody uses a commercial LLM, has a better, then the results might be better because the LLMs have a better databases. So that is my conclusion, that we need to further the discussion that AI can be helpful, but we need media literacy training for pastors. We need to develop our own GPTs and also involve the community. This is probably also can draw on Schleiermacher, but also if make our data available, so the data enter the training data of commercial LLMs. So if somebody uses them, they also get reliable answers. Thank you so much.